our News on Terror segment tonight, North Korea issues a new threat to the United States. Coming from the Hermit Kingdom's state-sponsored news agency, North Korea combined a brag and a threat towards the United States all in one to use their nuclear weapons capacity to wage an EMP attack against the U.S. Now, this is a threat that not a lot of Americans are familiar with, so we want to talk to an expert about exactly what it means. With me now from the Center for Security Policy, former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz. Fred, good to see you.
Hey, Liz, good to be here.
All right, Fred, this is a little bit of a new type of threat. I mean, obviously, North Korea's been launching missiles, testing hydrogen bombs here. They've been ramping up their nuke game, but now they're threatening an EMP attack against the United States, not a direct nuke attack. Explain to our viewers exactly what this means.
Yeah, let's talk about what EMP is. It stands for electromagnetic pulse, and it is a form of strong electromagnetic energy released by a nuclear reaction. The sun produces EMP, and sometimes solar storms can actually knock out electronics on Earth because EMP is sent to the Earth. Well, we discovered in the 1950s that nuclear blasts cause EMP and will wipe out electronics. Now, if a country has a tiny nuclear program, it can greatly magnify its effectiveness by setting off a small nuclear device high up in the atmosphere. This ionizes the atmosphere and can create a huge EMP effect that could knock out the electronics of almost an entire continent.
Right, and that's what North Korea, I'm sure, is threatening. I mean, this is not something that they're promising that will have just a little bit of impact. This would have devastating consequences. They're basically saying that they would launch a nuke into space and that the EMP effect from this effect on the electromagnetic grid, would disrupt the entire electronic grid of the United States. Fred, it sounds a little bit space fiction-y when we're talking about this kind of attack because it is indirect versus a bomb that we can see falling on a country. What would be the impacts if that happened to the United States?
Well, I should say that this solves the problem of what's called a reentry vehicle. This is what you have to build so your nuclear weapon doesn't burn up as it's falling through the atmosphere. If you set it up very high, North Korea doesn't have to develop one, and that's a significant technical challenge. My boss, Frank Gaffney, and you got to have him on to talk about this. Frank believes that a weapon set off at the correct altitude could kill 90% of the American population by knocking out the power system, refrigeration, electricity, all the things we need to run our economy. There's a congressional EMP commission. They've been complaining about this and warning Americans for many years, but no one paid attention.
No, and I guess let me ask you this. How does anyone defend against an EMP attack? This isn't something where you can shoot down a missile before it hits you. If it's not aimed at your country, you may not know it's coming. I mean, how do you stop the effects, or how do you defend against this?
Well, we first need strong missile defense to knock out North Korean missiles that could have this device. We don't know that they have them. They're very complicated. They're heavy. There are reports that Russia gave North Korea this technology a few years ago. The biggest vulnerability are power transformers. You know, those large devices you see around your city. Some of them are very expensive and time-consuming to make, and if enough of them break down, it could be many months before the power grid could be restored.
Right, and let's not forget the impact that would have on, I mean, everybody's day-to-day life, but I guess I'm excluding healthy people for a second and talking about hospitals, nursing homes, any type of care, critical care for which electricity is necessary. It's scary to think about, Fred. So that's the problem that we have. That's the threat against us. Let's talk about the solution for a second, because it's certainly not an easy solution. President Trump seems to be working on it. I'm not sure how far he's come or not. He talked to the Chinese president. This is what he said afterward.
We had a very good phone call. It lasted for a long time. President Xi would like to do something. We'll see whether or not he can do it. But we will not be putting up with what's happening at North Korea. I believe that President Xi agrees with me 100%. He doesn't want to see what's happening there either. We had a very, very frank and very strong phone call.
Fred, you were an intelligence analyst for the CIA. Tell us what you think is going on when when we're talking about negotiations between the United States and China, when we're talking about what's going on in North Korea, so much of it, we have to play the psychological game. Do we have enough intelligence on the ground in North Korea to be able to tell if Kim Jong-un is just blowing a lot of hot air here or if he actually intends to do this? And then secondarily, how much influence China has on him?
Well, I'm worried that this is not a deterrent. This is an offensive nuclear program that North Korea could one day use maybe to blackmail South Korea into uniting under the North's terms. It would be a catastrophe, maybe force all U.S. forces to leave Asia. I think China is very worried about this. China's actually worried that radioactive gases may be seeping across the border. This has been a concern for some time. But a blast that may be 100 kilotons, and today they're saying it may even have been larger. This people in China, they felt this. And China has a concern about unrest. The Chinese people don't like the North, don't like the Koreans either. I mean, there's a racism issue here. And I think that the idea that there could be huge nuclear weapons being tested right across the border is something that Chinese people are going to be very worried about.
Right, and I mean, I guess they should be. They should also be worried about the refugee issue that would inevitably flood their borders if something were to happen militarily. Trump says military action is not his first choice. I understand that from the perspective that China has said previously, just a week or so ago, that if North Korea acts first, that China will remain neutral. But if the United States acts first militarily, China will back North Korea militarily. That does put the United States in a bind just a little bit. But how much influence does China have? Is that why they're not putting more pressure on North Korea because they really can't control him, or do they honestly not feel that strongly about getting involved?
I don't think China has ever faithfully enforced resolutions against North Korea. It's always looked for exceptions. For example, it's resisted an oil embargo. Well, next week we want an oil embargo against North Korea. That would really hurt. We want to cut it off from the international financial system. That would really hurt. There's a Wall Street Journal article today that North Korean scientists developed these nuclear missile programs by getting PhDs in China, which is a violation of Security Council resolutions. China has to come to the decision that this is a serious threat to China and to start cooperating.
Right. And I think President Trump might be right. It's time to start sanctioning anybody who does trade anything whatsoever with North Korea, because it's simply dangerous. We have to cut them off. Something has to be done. We can't do 20 more years of this like President Clinton and then President Obama did. It simply won't work anymore. Fred, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.